Hey Phantom fans, you're watching Chronicle Chamber. My name is Scott, and today we are talking about Defenders of the Earth issue 6 from Mad Cave Studios. Defenders of the Earth issue 6 gets us back to the action of what's kind of happening in the latter half of this arc. Everything's kind of coming full circle and coming to a head after the first 5 issues here. This is the one issue that doesn't have series artist Jim Calafiore on art in his place. You know, DiDio is still writer. We have Matt Horak with Brent Schoonover doing art for a part of the book, and then Sal Velluto doing art for the other part of the book. Carlos M. Mangual still does letters, and we still have colors by Juancho. So everything else around this feels the same, but the art does look different in this brief interludes chapter for Defenders of the Earth. So it kind of starts off here. This is actually super important, these first few pages here. The art definitely shows a different style than Jim Calafiore. We are seeing the Matt Horak with Brent Schoonover art here in the beginning and peppered in the middle. We get a little brief play-by-play of what's going on. At the end of last issues, we saw that Lothar reconnected with his ex-wife Shakara in the Seven Nations. She's running it now, and she's actually working with Princess Castra, and so there's this connection with Kro-Tan. That was the big cliffhanger of the last issue. So here we get a play-by-play that, like, Flash is talking with Castra now, but that's really not panning out, trying to use Flash. He's kind of outlived his usefulness. Phantom is with Jeddah in the hospital after the big battle last issue between Phantom and his brother Kurt Walker, who was wearing the mantle of the Phantom at the time. Really explosive issue there, you know, when it was revealed that Kurt Walker, of course, was given the go-ahead to be the Phantom and was working with Kro-Tan. So here we have this conversation, you know, kind of outlining what has happened. Basically that Kro-Tan using his Baron Atomics powerhouse to rebuild Earth is kind of consolidated. It has an army and they're ready to go ahead and conquer, Octon being the big brain of the operation here. But something that should be highlighted, if you checked out our review for Flash Gordon Quarterly number 2, there was a mini story in there about Octon, and actually in tandem with the release of this issue, there is a Flash Gordon Quarterly number 3 that also goes into further backstory for Octon for the Defenders of the Earth series. And that one is even more important than the Quarterly 2 issue because of who is behind Octon. It's actually confirming a lot of theories I've had and that everybody on the X-Band podcast has talked about in our mid-series review of this series. So something worth checking out. But as we head into this issue, you know, we see there's a little bit of a battle, you know, going on here in terms of this argument between Octon and Kro-Tan. So, you know, Octon's kind of questioning Kro-Tan's, you know, genius here. And again, Flash Gordon Quarterly number 3 really outlines why Kro-Tan questions and basically says, hey, you know, I thought we had your mind wiped and the other personality inside you wiped clean. And Octon tries to backpedal and say, I misspoke. You know, and then we have a view of Garax comes in and says, hey, Mongor is in tatters. All these different races on Mongor are at war with each other. Kro-Tan is pleased with it. He doesn't want them to wipe each other out because his ultimate goal, it's kind of implied here, is he's going to conquer Earth. That's pretty explicit. But he's going to use Earth and his armies he's creating on Earth as a base of operations to reclaim Mongor, which is the homeworld for Ming the Merciless, Kro-Tan, and Princess Castra. So while that's going on, we have human workers who are sneaking away and they are starting a rebellion. So we're getting some action, you know, carrying through here. Meanwhile, at the Seven Nations, we go back to Lothar and Shakara, and they're kind of arguing. They're, you know, Lothar's upset that Shakara and the Seven Nations seem to be in league with Kro-Tan. And so there's this bicker back and forth on how Lothar left and Shakara had to do what she had, essentially. But she reveals that working with Princess Castra has bought her some time because she can see, you know, Princess Castra's guards are here, but outside their walls, there's this huge army that's amassing. So Castra has, you know, delayed the Kro-Tan army from seizing the Seven Nations here. So more back and forth. We see, you know, Kro-Tan still analyzing things from afar. We see Flash and Castra having their reconnection. If you remember from the earlier part of this series, there was this will they, won't they kind of a romantic undercurrent going on between them. That has since dissipated, I think, since issue 4, I want to say. kind of went real cold around issue 3 or issue 4. But we have this, Castra's trying to beg Flash to come with her, and Flash is like, no, I gotta save Earth. These are my peoples. And, they have their little back and forth, their little, tease of romance here, and it ends in Castra knocking Flash Gordon out and giving him a kiss on the cheek here while he's incapacitated. Kind of funny. I find that one a little bit of amusing. But this leads to the big explosion and action-packed aspect of this series. So if you've been looking for the action in this series, the first few issues, it was kind of absent as a lot of pieces were moved into play. Here, there was a lot of explosions and warfare, and, basically Dan DiDio and the creative team have been setting up their action figures, and now it's time to mash them together. So, we see that going on here, this big explosion, the rebellion inside Kro-Tan's base. And this is kind of one of the highlights of this issue here is this war. It's kind of fun to see, the art team play around with it, play with, Garax's weird-looking troops, and, these little laser blasts back and forth. It does feel like the cartoon. It almost, you can almost hear the sound effects in your head. While they're trying to quell the rebellion, Kro-Tan gets shot, and Garax is kind of impenetrable, so he's fine. But, we have this little bit of warfare before we cut to kind of it's jarring at first, but this is probably a highlight of the issue for me, is Mandrake the Magician is visiting a hospital in the Seven Nations. It's a children's hospital, and he's handing out action figures of himself. And I think what I like about this, in this series so far, Mandrake has been very calm and kind of like the level-headed, easygoing member of Defenders of the Earth. He's pretty cool, and just he kind of magic aways every kind of problem they have. But here, he reconnects with Kshin, who was working for Kro-Tan and now is swaying and like, well, I didn't sign up for this. I was trying to learn and grow, and it seems like Kro-Tan's against Earth, which kind of no duh. But Kshin was like, I was afraid to talk to you because I thought you'd be mad at me. And Mandrake's like, why would you think I'd be mad at you? He's like, you had to seek out your mentors and grow, and that's what you had to do. No hard feelings. But it's just, I think I like this because amid all of the maelstrom of action and explosions, you have Mandrake being calm and being, one of those, kind of like one of those everyday heroes we talk about. Like, these guys are heroes. They're saving the world. Their whole thing is Defenders of the Earth. But here's him, just trying to bring joy to children amidst all this catastrophic destruction, and everything going on. And if you look at this in like a socio-political level, I guess you can argue that, it's kind of like the reason why I hesitated at this is because, especially in the United States, there's a lot going on. Every day the news is kind of scary, and whether you're looking at global news or you're looking at domestic news with what's going on in the country, it's kind of scary and terrifying, and, a lot happening very quickly. But there are still the helpers in society, and that's kind of why this stood out to me, is this is like a society helping in a small way that could have a very impactful, meaningful engagement with these children that can encourage them to grow up to walk in Mandrake's leads. That's kind of our footsteps. That's how I take this. So, also in the hospital here, we have Djordje, who's recovering. She wants to get back in action, and Phantom's like, no, doctor said you got to recover. So they're, chatting it over. LJ is here. He's also injured. He took a bullet. So he's recovering. He's fighting with Rick Gordon because, hey, all this stuff was set off by, Flash working with Kro-Tan initially. But Phantom intervenes and says, Kro-Tan wants us all to fight. And the minute we do that, then we break down and Earth is really doomed. And so this is really the only glimpse of the Phantom we get in this issue, unfortunately. However, it's an important one. Phantom here is kind of the thread for the team, keeping everybody together. He gives Jedi a kiss. We see a little Zuffy action. And this is also going back to kind of the core theme of this arc so far, which is the Defenders were separated in the first issue. Now they're coming together, and it's this union to join together to fight a greater evil. That's the main thread. That's kind of the goal of the storyline, it seems, for this 8-issue limited series. When everybody leaves, and Jedda's ready to go to sleep, they turn the lights off, and she sees her grandfather. And so this is a callback to the Council of the Phantoms we saw in an earlier issue. And, you know, her grandfather basically says, you have earned your place. When the time comes, you know what to do. Very important moment. Could mean a lot of things. My feeling is that maybe we'll see, because our main Phantom right now is technically a ghost that's still around thanks to some kind of magicking of Mandrake, maybe Jetta will become the Phantom by the end of the series. That's just a wild guess, but, you know, I feel like there's a little bit of, it could lean that way. But that speaks to really what the issue with this storyline is there are a lot of moving pieces, and there are a lot of things that aren't connected well. So, like, last issue we talked about Kurt Walker and bringing him in. Kro-Tan's ties to him are very thin, and that's a problem still here. We have all these ties to things. There's 7 nations connected to Kro-Tan. You know, we learned that Shakara did that because she's kind of delaying the army, but these things aren't threaded in a way that sells it. They're thrown in there. They are connected, but it's not. We need more, I think, is what the problem is here. And so, you know, we have that in this storyline too, is, you know, we're finally getting a callback to the Council of the Phantoms here, but we need a little more to sell this connection there, why we saw them and now we're seeing a member of that council again. It's just, it's not fluid enough to seal the deal in the story. There's a lot of gaps that readers really need to fill in to make the story, you know, flow nicely. You know, and that's a complaint I think I've mentioned in a few reviews, is that there's a lot of things thrown at the wall in this series. Some work, some don't. When it comes back to art, you know, Carlos M. Mangual continues on his work. I actually really like his work on letters here for the Council of the Phantoms. I think that's a really cool effect to kind of make it ghostly, and we have the purple, and there's emphasis on it, so you can kind of hear it in like a stern, grandfatherly Phantom voice. Colors are still fantastic, you know, very bright, very much like the cartoons. The art, you know, there is a difference between the two art teams, very clear difference. I really like the Sal Velluto art. It really feels like the cartoon to me, you know, even maybe more so than Jim Calafiore. But, you know, Jim Calafiore is a great artist in his own right as well. So we get to the end here. Kro-Tan is kind of monologuing. This is probably my favorite page in the book. We have Kro-Tan kind of doing his monologue to the backdrop of things he's highlighting. You know, how Earth was in shambles when Ming invaded. He fixed it up by bringing barren atomics to the world, and now he's going to conquer it, you know? And he's saying all this while he's torturing the leader of the rebellion. And so they're going to turn the leader of rebellion into a soldier. We know that. That's what they've explained in previous issues. They're taking humans and turning them into ice soldiers. Octon is given orders to prepare to assault the 7 nations, and that is where we leave. We have this nice shot of Garax's army, you know, the triangle-headed. They all kind of look like Nimrod from X-Men, if you're familiar with that. But we have this army invading, you know, good to go, and tease for next issue where we're going to have this, assumedly there's a battle between 7 nations and Kro-Tan's army. So that's the issue. Leave us a comment below. Let us know what you think. And, you know, we will talk over Defenders of the Earth next month as we wrap up this series and come to a close for the 8-issue limited run that this was originally planned for. If you like this review, you can visit chroniclechamber.com for more reviews, news, updates, or everything related to the Phantom, or check out X-Band the Phantom podcast. If you want to hear more from me personally, you can find me at scottwaldenwrites.com or on Blue Sky at writerscott.bsky.com. Thanks for watching.